Hi, Jill.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good. What you been up to?
I'm down in Miami with Don.
You are?
Yeah.
Nice. What are you doing there?
I had a conference and clients to see, and it just on Saturday morning when I got to 7:00, it's time to get out for a little bit.
Well, that's good.
Did you guys get much snow yesterday?
But not much. It's really cold though.
Okay.
Supposed to warm up a bit.
Yeah, I brought too many wool socks. I don't need them
It's
here.
Miami.
Yeah.
You never know.
You never know. Yeah, what you're gonna hit.
For those of you online, we are waiting for Mayor Billy. Tom, can you hear me?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, just making sure.
Yep, I'm here. Granted, we just have four board, let's see, one, two, three board members, right?
So, and it's a town hall, so it's not an official meeting where quorum is not a
Mm-hmm.
thing. Means
Okay. Who else are we waiting for
we
tonight?
have in the room is Trustee Severs and Trustee Sterling. You are the only
Mm-hmm.
one online at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
We were just talking, we didn't actually take quorum for this meeting, so I cannot guarantee if Trustee Coombs Ismail and Trustee Corvalon will be present.
Hmm. Okay.
Trustee Coombs Ismail is here in the
Okay,
room.
great. Okay.
And you're in the room. You're here. Eric's in the house. Right. And so is Mayor Billy.
Welcome, everybody. I want to welcome everyone to the January 31st Town Hall meeting. Our focus tonight is on our police department, our police situation, and in general, we'll have some quick intros, and then I'll talk kind of a basic timeline of kind of the more recent events in our journey with the police, and then we will open up a lot of public comment tonight. I definitely want to make it clear we're here to talk about the police situation in Nederland. If you have comments about other of the many issues here in Nederland, please write us an email at bot@nederlandco.org and show up next Tuesday, where we will be moving. We'll have public comment times at that point for non-agenda items as well as agenda items, but today it's specifically about the police. So first of all, I want to welcome Sheriff Curtis. I don't know who's who because I don't even know you guys. I guess I recognize you now from the posters. Sheriff Curtis Johnson, and then Division Chief Jim Chamberlain. I'm Mayor Billy Giblin. Nice to meet you guys. Thanks for being here today. We have Sheriff Johnson and Division Chief Chamberlain here to really talk about, well, they'll take some time to talk about our present, our past and present and continual and future relationship with the sheriff's office as we figure out what to do specifically here for Nederland. So I guess I kind of introduced you guys, but let me just take a minute. Fortunately, my computer died the moment I got home before I brought up this timeline. So
Do we need to call a meeting order? Or
actually, thanks, Tom, we do not, right? I might need a little help because this is the first town hall I've run. Miranda and Jennifer, just let me know on the specifics compared to a usual open meeting.
It's much more informal than an open meeting, a regular meeting or special meeting. And you can introduce the Board of Trustees if you'd like, take roll, but it is informal.
Okay, that sounds good. Why don't we start with the trustee, the one trustee that's online. Just introduce yourself, Tom, and then we'll go around and introduce ourselves. And then you guys can actually introduce yourselves better than I just did. So Tom, if you want to introduce yourself to the folks here.
Tom Mahold, Mayor Pro Tem, out tonight.
Thanks. Nicole, we're just going to come around.
Nicole Sterling, BOT.
Jesse Severs. I live right across the street. BOT.
Neighbor. I'm Billy Giblin. I'm the mayor and a trustee, therefore.
I'm Tanya Corvalon, and I'm also a trustee.
And I'm Eric Coombs Ismail. I'm a trustee as well.
I'm Jennifer Madsen, the town attorney.
Jim Chamberlain, I'm the Operations Division Chief for the Sheriff's Office.
And I'm Curtis Johnson, the sheriff.
Well, congratulations, Sheriff.
Oh yes, congratulations on your election.
I am Miranda Fisher, Town Administrator.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So Miranda, I am not seeing this timeline, so I'm just going to kind of wing it, unless you can remind me where this letter went because I'm not finding it. But
I can forward it to you right now.
that'd be great. I had to coach today, so I've gotten tons of emails, and I can't even tell which is which here at the moment. Yeah, as we know, we just our Nederland Police Department, Nederland Marshal's Office, slowly decreased in numbers over the last year. And then this summer, towards the end of our campaign, right before our election, where Jesse and I were elected, Chief Fine-Levin resigned, and the town accepted her resignation. And then we went through a month or two of some conversations with the sheriff's office and conversations with ourselves and the different departments in the town and the town government, and deciding what to do. And we ultimately decided to move ahead with a rebuild. And so Miranda, our town administrator, and Chief David Hayes, who is presently the marshal, what do they call him?
He's the chief of Estes Park.
Chief, yeah, at Estes Park. And before that was in Louisville, I believe. And he also is affiliated with the, I'm sorry, I can't remember that.
Colorado Associations of Chiefs of Police.
Okay, the Colorado Associations of Chiefs of Police. So they also, were willing to support us primarily through Chief David Hayes. And Chief David Hayes and Miranda, when we opened up our process to just openly recruit, we ended up getting, I think, over 60 applications total over the next couple months. And then there was a combination of interviews with initial screening, and then interviews with Miranda and Chief David Hayes. And then if people move through those, there'd be background checks and more rigorous kind of scrutiny. Out of that, we ended up with a candidate for sheriff or for marshal, and he came out here from North Carolina. He visited with the public. He visited with sheriff's office and a lot of the other emergency services in the area, and he visited with the town, all the heads of the town departments, and then ultimately, then he came to meet with us, the BOT, in our interview, and we offered him the job, and he took a little bit of time and got back to us and accepted the job. And so we had about a month of transition for him to make things kind of wrap things up back in North Carolina and start making this move out here. And during that time, some things happened, and some things happened is all we know for sure. We probably can assume things, but we don't know for sure. And he needed to decline for personal reasons. So that put us back in a situation we were in, months prior, with really, at that time, looking at our other candidates. Some had moved on, some hadn't passed background checks, and we are kind of in a situation where we would be starting over from scratch. So we talked about it a couple weeks ago, and the guidance we gave town staff was to have some preliminary conversations or have some current conversations with the sheriff's department, and we also planned this town hall so we could hear from the public before we move ahead with our future plans with the police department. So that's my basic timeline, given that I didn't actually see the nicely written out one. Hopefully I nailed it. And I mostly want a lot of this to be, in my mind, public comment this evening, and definitely questions and answers, and it'd be good to get perspective from the all the trustees as well, and maybe a lot of the trustees will be answering some of the questions directly too, if they're asked directly. So that's my thinking. How's everyone? Does anyone want to have kind of I'm definitely open if any of y'all trustees have like an opening statement or something you want to say to get things rolling. That's great. And if not, I'd like to open it up to the public. And we have people online as well as in person tonight.
I don't know that any of us, I'd rather hear from the public unless any of my fellow trustees have something to say.
Yeah, I think I think everyone's feeling the same way as you, Tom.
Mayor Billy, can we just confirm we go to public? Are you limiting it at all in terms of time, or how do you want to structure that?
Let's go with the 3 minutes and then just kind of see if it makes sense at times to go longer.
Okay.
I don't feel too rigid, but at the same time, it's a good structure because I do want to allow time for everyone to talk.
And we have been doing 3 minutes for questions and response as well.
Yeah, thanks. So what we moved to, what the BOT moved to back in the spring, I guess early summer, was that it would be, in a more formal open setting, you get your 3 minute public comment, and then there could be questions. Like when in the planning commission, this is something that's more normal where we often ask questions of the people. When I was in the planning commission before, that had given comments, and to give us time to go have a bit of a back and forth and better understand the comments. So we've started doing that in the BOT as well. So we may or may not structure the time too rigidly, but we would definitely, allow for back and forth and allow for questions after your comments.
Mayor Billy, I would also recommend that maybe you start with just whoever's in the room or whoever's online. You do one or the other, just since they can't see each other. Just a recommendation.
That's a good one. Why don't we start in the room? If that works for you, pressure's on. Me? Oh, and also, yeah, great. Thanks for getting rid of the other mic.
My name is Elizabeth Gerton. I live at 65 Rickery Circle in Nederland. And I actually feel that reestablishing our own Nederland Police Department is critical to the safety of everyone in the town. I don't know how many people in the room were here during the floods of 2013 or the 4 Mile Canyon fire, but I was. And frankly, our Nederland Police Department was amazing, and they were critical to coordinating with the other emergency agencies, the Sheriff's Department, the federal agencies, the county, the state, and they kept us informed and let us know what we should do, and in fact, more importantly, what we should not do during those disasters. And I value very much the Boulder Sheriff's Department and their support for our town and our community. They've been tremendous. But in a disaster of that nature, of that size, I'm concerned that we cannot really rely fully or entirely on the Sheriff's Department. They have limited staffing, and frankly, it has to be deployed to the areas where the greatest number of people and the greatest number of properties are at risk. And frankly, no matter how we look at it, that won't be Nederland. And it also makes a difference when your own police department knows the area and they know the people. Makes a big difference in an emergency situation. Just a few weeks ago over the December holiday, I have a security system on my house, and I was away visiting family, and the alarm went off, and so the security agency sent the Sheriff's Department, but they ended up at my neighbor's house. And so I talked with them and tried to explain several times where my house was. At that point, my brother had gotten to my house. There was no problem, and so we let that go. But suppose it had been a more serious emergency, somebody with a heart attack or a stroke who really needed help. Knowing the area, knowing where our homes are, knowing who the people are, especially in a critical emergency, makes a big difference in how well served everyone is. In the most recent election, I voted for the property tax increase. And quite frankly, I did so because it was promoted as an opportunity to provide funding to restore our Nederland Police Department, and I just felt that was critical. It isn't the only critical priority, but I think it is a core service to our town. And it's important that we have those people in place who know us, who know who the elderly are in the community, who know who the disabled are and where they live. And in an emergency situation, they have a plan in place for how we're going to get those people out. I just think that taking a substantial portion of those additional tax monies and devoting those toward funding our own police department, who can coordinate then with our Boulder County Sheriff's Department, is essential to the town and to the town continuing as a good community to live in. So thank you.
Thank you. What was your first name again?
Elizabeth.
thanks.
Elizabeth Curtin. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Elizabeth.
I'm not shy. I'll step right up. I'm Jim Reese, 66 Barker Road, 10-year resident of town, and I'm here to say I understand the angst that the local community has with wanting to have our own police department, but unfortunately, the times they are a-changing. The policing environment in our country is not like it's been in the past. The days of having a police department where we have a Larry Johns on department for 20 years are long gone. If we ever ended up with an officer in our department for more than a couple, 2 to 3 years, I'd be extremely surprised. The main thing I have concerned about is the cost. The cost of standing up a police department from scratch, getting it fully staffed up, trained, certification, equipment, all of those costs are huge for a town of our size. The strain on our town administrator to recruit, vet, and hire, or at least present applicants to our community will eat up her time, I think, for the next 3 months, just going through those applications. Wage parity, we had to raise our cost of policing up to that with parity with Boulder and Denver. I don't think we're going to be able to make that next jump in 3 years when wages go up again. Okay. The last time we had a contract that we considered with Boulder County, we still had officers on staff. I know this because I was married to the town manager. I still am. She's not the town manager anymore. I'm still married to her. But I know that one of the issues was we were going to have to let go some of the existing officers because they were not going to be absorbed by Boulder County Sheriff's Office. And that was a huge factor in the decision to not go ahead and go with that contract at the time. I'm going to say that the cost of having a professional department to the level that Boulder County has for training, certification, vetting, psychological testing, equipment, all of those things and the standards that they required if they're officers, we're going to be much better off in the long run as a community. The other thing we have to think about is the insurance cost to the town. Okay, I know that there's a large community in Colorado that just recently was not able to have their insurance for their police department renewed, and they are now self-insured. You can imagine who that, what community that is, that my wife now is part of the leadership on. So I'm going to say right now that as much as people want us to go back to having a local police department, I just don't think it is realistic for what the future of policing is going to be. And we would be much better off, hearing some of the details on what Boulder County would have to offer us. As I assign it, we would have some assigned deputies right here in Nederland at our police department, right in the shopping center. And we would have some of those folks that over time would be some of those faces that we would get to know. And I think that they would do an excellent job for our community at half the cost. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Roger.
Roger Cornell, 998 State Highway 72 North. I'm really going to just go right down the middle. I'm not going to sit here and try to lobby one way or the other. If I could do and not get lost in a whole bunch of history, but I would ask everybody in the community to have a little confidence in the Board of Trustees that they elected. This decision is not an easy decision, and I'm certain that the trustees are going to have already worked very hard on the police department, only to start over again. So you certainly know all the questions. We've heard one good for a marshal, one good for the county testimony. And I would just like to say that I've been here since actually 1977. And we've gone back and forth. There's an awful lot of good having some marshals and having your own police department. And it's been I don't know, 25 years that we've actually had the county in the shops up here and seen what, the marshal's office can do. There was talk about the one flood, that was fantastic, but there was also, wasn't really but the marshal's office was involved when we had a fire a few years ago. Thank God we had the county and the professionalism for that. So I guess what I'm saying, it goes either way. And we have certainly have had, without going into details, some really bad experience with marshals and experiences with some of the deputies. And we have had many great ones. And so it is a mixed bag. And what I would ask everybody in the community to have confidence in this board that we elected and who have demonstrated through the last year of their dedication, hard work, and everybody in this room I know has the best of Nederland at their hearts. So, and I would just say that that's the way our government works, that we have these 7 people, community members, that are going to work very hard to make the right decision. And I'd ask everybody to have confidence in your guys' decision, that you'll do a good thing for Nederland, and that we will end up with either, a marshal or a system that'll work very well for Nederland, because we've definitely have flip-flopped, I think, too much in the past year, certainly in recent history. And as Jim has pointed out, it's a new time, a new era. So good luck, and I hope we all have support you in your decision. I certainly do.
Thank you, Roger.
Thanks, Roger.
So, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I waved in that direction, and of course, everyone on that side. So
I'm Jim Girton. I'm Elizabeth's brother. I live up on Tejas Lane, just a short ways from here. I've lived here for about 7.5 years now. And I have very mixed feelings about our options. Prior to living here, I lived in a community that was not incorporated, and we had to rely on a sheriff's department. And they did, I think, the best job they possibly could. But like a lot of sheriff's departments, they had a large county and a limited budget. There were times when they were stretched thin. And when that happened, I saw a couple of them. Although they did the best they could, their response times were sometimes measured in hours. And that doesn't always work in an emergency. So that concerns me. When they did respond, they were very professional, they were very good. But sometimes there was just so much they could do when they had a lot going on in other parts of the county. And there was an emergency in our community. I would say our average response time was probably about 20 minutes. But I also saw response times of more than an hour and a half. So we never knew. And that would be my main concern with not having our own police department. I think that there are issues with that, as have been pointed out, in terms of the town funding it, the amount of effort that it takes. And when I've seen the Boulder Sheriff's Office, respond up here as they did in the fire a few years ago, they were very, very good. I was very impressed. But again, that's when the emergency was here. And I guess what I would like the board to consider is look at the whole picture, make sure that if the best option is the sheriff's department up here, that we have full-time staff that's part of the community. Because otherwise, I would have a lot of concerns about some of the same things my sister raised. Do they know the people? Do they know where perhaps disabled or elderly are that might need more help than someone else? Those are major concerns when something happens. And so, we need that kind of support up here if we become isolated in an emergency. That being said, I'd like to hear or know at least what the sheriff's department could propose, that could address some of those concerns. But I also think, we have an elected board. You have an obligation to really look at the alternatives. But I think before you make your final decision, it might be a wise idea to present all the facts, put them in the paper, put them out on the website, and have a chance just with a general poll, not a binding election, but a general poll of the voters in the community, and take their pulse and see, because a lot of us voted for the tax increase, wanting a local police department. So put all the facts out there and at least look for some guidance, via a quick poll of the community where they have a chance to maybe voice their opinions one way or the other once you present the alternatives to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. May?
May Gerald. I live here in Netherlands since 88 and in Boulder County since 59. So I actually agree with almost everything that's been said. Support the board. Thank you for the opportunity to bring it before the public. I like the last idea of having an informed public dialogue. And I think the bulk of people still don't really know, and I don't know, and I'm hoping for clarification tonight. What would the cost be with Boulder County? What would the cost be, best case scenario, in Nederland? What about worst case scenario? As somebody brought up, we haven't always been lucky with our choice of marshals. So if we were to hire someone that was overzealous or something like that, then we'd have to go through it all again. Prices are going to go up. In terms of what Elizabeth brought up about the individualized care, I have 2 points of reference on that. One is I want to thank the sheriffs again for your deputy who knocked on my door one night about 11 p.m. during a snowstorm to say, there's a mountain lion right outside your horse corral, because I'm the one person that has horses in town. And he went out with me to make sure that mountain lion had taken off. We went up there with a flashlight. So every time I've ever called the sheriff dispatch, I've actually had better service at times than I have with the Nederland cops. I love Larry like everyone else. Well, not everyone, but I really did like Larry. I thought he did a good job. But some of the other people, they're biased. They know what the town politics are. They know who's in favor with the town administrator or the town uppity-ups, and they know who's not. And that can become a very toxic situation. And just finally, the other part of what Elizabeth was saying about the care and tending of people at risk and so forth. As a town, we are long overdue. We've talked about it. We've scribbled on our notebooks about our evacuation plan in the event of a fire. Maybe we need to do some updating of our maps with Boulder County. There are a lot of things that the town can do to ensure the safety of our residents, including the development of neighborhood PAL systems. And there are a lot of ways that by asking the community how they think we can handle things, how we can provide for those people. You know, people do it in rural communities, which is where I grew up. Even in Brazil, I lived in the country. So, you know, I do believe that we can't afford anymore to keep our head in this 60,000 foot view for where we're going to have the money for everything we want. I think up here, I know there's just been this constant request for money from the town, this constant scrambling for grants and money, and we got to do this to get money and that to get money. So if we can trade and save some money, maybe do a little extra work as a community to make up. But I agree, I'm very unlikely we're going to find another Larry. I understand Jake was interested in the position, but in my opinion, bringing somebody in from, you know, Dark Bend, Arkansas, is not necessarily going to solve our problems immediately. So, thank you.
Thanks, man. So maybe we'll take a few more comments and then maybe give you guys a chance to talk a bit about, you know, how you see law enforcement when you work with the incorporated parts of the county, like Superior, Alliance.
Mayor, but I would recommend that you allow those online to finish and just finish the public comments since they've been waiting.
Okay. Got prep. This is my first town hall, so we're doing it. Scott.
Thanks, Billy. Scott Papich. I live here in town limits. I've lived here for a number of years. I want to thank the board for having this gathering, for the opportunity to speak with the Sheriff's Department here, and thanks for being here. A couple of things. First of all, I know that there are quite a few people in town who are used to having our own police department, and it's very comforting to have that. We've had it for many, many years. We had a long run with Larry Johns, and I know there are people who still feel like that's the way it should be. I know we just passed some taxes to provide for the community to pay for that. But I have a couple of really rational points I'd like to bring to the table that I want everybody to be aware of. I don't have any personal interest in this except that I live here too, and I would love for us to have the best bang for the buck in law enforcement. The first thing I want to bring up is, you know, there's a few comments tonight about the cost, how we paid up. We're paying up for our own police department. But I will tell you that also gives us, if we decide to go with the sheriff's office for a little bit less spend, that does give us as a community some breathing room in the way we do everything else as a town. I can tell you that's not a bad thing. Okay. So that's the first thing is getting the most bang for your buck when it comes to law enforcement. The other thing that I would like to move on to is I do a fair amount of volunteer work in the community, and quite a bit of that volunteer work involves the presence of law enforcement. And I will tell you that I couldn't say enough about the quality of work, the level of training and the professionalism of the Sheriff's Department who supports this town. Every time they show up, they do a great job. And you see a lot of the same faces from the Sheriff's Department. And for people who worry that they don't know the locals well enough, I will tell you that they do get to know the locals quite well, and they do care a lot about people who sometimes need a little extra attention, and they show that over and over. The third point I would like to make, and then I'll finish up, is that as much as people would like to have a police department, I will tell you, we as a community, we have a level of vulnerability with that position. We've seen it happen now, that all it takes is a couple of officers to move on, and we're at a point then where every officer who's left on a police department is overburdened, and you're at risk of them moving on. We've seen it happen. We've also seen that when we go to hire law enforcement, if they decide not to hang out, stay for the long term, that puts us back in a position of having to start over again. That's a really big issue. of being vulnerable and that you can't keep a department maintained. And so for all those reasons, I would tell you, we need good law enforcement. And I would like to assure everybody in the community that we have a good solution in front of us with the sheriff's department. We would have a good solution in front of us with the PD if we could hire them quickly and keep them maintained. But nobody here needs to be afraid of what we have with Boulder County Sheriff's Office. They're professional and they're well-trained and they're reliable. Thanks for hearing me out.
Thanks, Scott. We'll go ahead and keep going with public comment in the room, and then we'll go online.
Kathleen Chip, 32-year resident of East Magnolia and 20-year business owner. Where I live off East Magnolia, my time usually is an hour to 2 hours where I'm at. So I keep that in mind. I thought I was going to say, I don't care what happens. But while I'm sitting here listening to comments, I'm thinking about my experiences. And I just so everyone knows, I was assaulted in my store. And when I called the cops, and it was, Jen had been gone, and the sheriff's department were there in 4 minutes. And I was extremely thankful. I didn't like the fact that the person wasn't arrested because I had to leave my store and they were going crazy. So, but response time was excellent. At the same time, yes, I love people who are local, but there are no more local people that are willing to be police. I was not part of the group that wanted to defund police. I thought that was complete insanity. But also, who wants to be a police officer now? Because of defund police, there's limited access. I don't see how Nederland's going to fire it up money-wise, liability-wise. I think I would rather go with the sheriff's. And I will say, twice my store at 35 East First Street was broken into overnight. And I unfortunately had green officers it was the first time they took fingerprints. It was just a mess. That was local, okay? Neither one of those were solved. And then I was broken when I had the dispensary at 95 East First. I had that on video, again, local and unsolved. So I had another experience where I was robbed in my store. I had the guy standing there. I'm pretty sure that if I had locked him in my store, I could have been charged with kidnapping myself. But I knew he had a $300 cuff in his pocket. I called Larry, and Larry said, oh, hey, follow him around town for the next hour and a half because I had to drive a drunk down to Boulder to book him. So having local police that are not here, okay, I followed the guy. I had to close my store. I followed this guy around into all the other shops and told all the other businesses he was a thief. And then after an hour, I was like, I can't keep doing this. You know, he almost ran people over. I call it now. Here's another thing. We call in his plate. The guy's leaving down Boulder Canyon. I call the sheriff's department and say, the thief is coming with my cuff, turquoise cuff down the mountain. Never heard back. So I've had good and bad, but I will say if it comes to time-wise, it's excellent with the Boulder Sheriff's Department, and I would prefer the competency, and I think they'll have better luck keeping officers than Nederland will.
Thanks, Kathleen. I agree with your comment about defund the police. That movement was so foolish and has made it hard for, not this one, but I agree. A lot of people did, but I think every police department, including the sheriff's office, Nederland, pretty much across the country, state, federal, or state, county, municipal, it's hard to recruit police officers. That movement did not help. Someone else have a comment? Thanks, Kathleen.
Do you have comments online if you wanted to move to that platform?
Anyone else in the room? Oh, couple. Oh, Ty, Chris, take it.
I'm Aaron Ty. I live at 289 West Bree Street.
You got to eat the thing.
Better. Yeah. I am actually a former Nederland police officer. I will tell you, it is hard being a police officer up here, especially when you're the only police officer that lives in town. It's hard to go out and have a meal in a restaurant without somebody approaching you about a case that you're working on for them. It is tricky. I've trained with these guys. They know what they're doing. I'm friends with some of them. I went to academy with some of them. I'll tell you, it is tricky being a police officer up here because you don't get the common crimes that happen. So the training kind of leaves your head. If you pull somebody over for a DUI, you may not get another DUI for 3 months. And you may have trouble looking back on what you did in that situation, the proper way to do it. It is tricky. I'm all for rebuilding our police department, but it's true, times are changing. It's harder and harder to be a police officer anymore. So I can really go either way. Like I said, I've trained with these guys. They know what they're doing. They train well. They train hard. And I just wanted to give you my opinion. Thank you.
Thanks, Ty. Chris?
Chris Bray, 339 Sunrise Lane, Gilpin now. But I used to be 224 West Pine Street, Nederland for 39 years. I was mayor. I've had issues with the police department. I've had issues with sheriffs. All were fine. My feelings are this. One, you need to find in the budget how to make the system work. And I think what you may want to look into is a hybrid, which is working with Boulder County and having somebody local here. This isn't Mayberry. We don't have Barney Fife and Andy Griffith to run the town anymore like it used to be. Things have changed. There's a lot more people here than when they were in 82 when I got here. And I've seen lots and lots of changes. What we need to be able to do is just have, when you're in your budget time, look into all the departments, see where you can shave something, that you can make something work for everybody. There's a lot of people in the town that want to see somebody who has the caliber of being a social worker as well as a police officer. 9 times out of 10, if you diffuse the situation goes further in the right direction. If you need to have the sheriffs there as a standby and a backup. I think Boulder County Sheriff's Department is well-trained, and what we had in the past here was well-trained officers as well. Some of them did not have the ability to communicate with people, and that was a strong suit that was left to the chiefs and things like that to deal with. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Anyone else in the room have any public comments? Okay, you folks online, someone, go ahead.
Ames has raised his hand.
Hey, Ames, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Terrific. Thanks. Thanks to all of you there who have made comment, and there have been some great thoughts, and appreciate all your insight. My comments are, well, first of all, I've been a homeowner in Nederland for 3 generations. I'm the third, and I've basically grown up there. I'm currently only a resident in the summertime, and so while I'm there, I depend on law enforcement for my personal safety. And when I'm not, I depend on law enforcement to protect my property. And I consider it to be very important. Certainly the sheriff could do that, but I don't think that it's what we want to do for our community. And I do appreciate the notions of cost savings. And but the real issue that I have with that is that we got in this problem because the police department didn't have the proper place within the scope of the budget, and other things were funded ahead of it, and then we got in trouble. So when we get properly funded and properly managed, we're not going to have issues with understaffing and so forth. I think half the price is a little bit flippant. I did run some of the numbers. I came from Centennial, where Arapahoe County Sheriff was subcontracted for the services of the city police, and the things I'm going to say now were my personal experience there. I'm just going to read a statement that I wrote to the trustees, email for the rest of the citizens. Law enforcement is nearly the primary responsible of municipal public service. We have not budgeted for it in that way, and now we are where we are. Turning over the single most important thing that our central community governance can manage to an organization who is elected by a huge supermajority of voters in the county will most certainly affect our town in ways we can and that we can't imagine. Police will not be reinforced by the organization. It will be prescriptive in a contract. Tone will not be set by a command structure. It will be defined by the agreement. Culture will not be established by our small town character. It will be inherited by that of the Boulder County Sheriff and his initiatives as an elected official begotten to 329,000 Boulder County voters. Our municipal leadership's ability to influence our law enforcement will be arm's length. Good at best when our officers are in leadership are exceptional, but that's not when we need the most control. When challenges arise, our ability to govern and control our own outcomes will become limited, and only the agreements in the contract will govern. This is about our self-sovereignty, and it's about our community. Policy, tone, culture, and influence are what we have as a community. The minute we subcontract, the one glue, law enforcement, that holds us together is the minute we really start to become just a member of the county. And I just implore you to remember why you decided months ago to pursue a police department. None of the reasons that we decided to do that as a community and you as the board of trustees decided to do it was because of good reasons that we evaluated then. We have certainly backed all the way up to now where we're reevaluating even those reasons, but they haven't changed. The compelling reasons have not changed, and the cost hasn't changed. And the times are changing, but the times are showing that more local control over your law enforcement is even more important. That's what the times are telling us about police enforcement. Thank you.
Thanks, Ames.
Melody?
Melody?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
A little quiet, but yeah.
All right, this is Melody Baumhover. I'm a Nederland resident, and I was gonna make a longer comment, but I think what I'll say is thank you very much, Ames, for so eloquently saying all that. I feel the exact same way on all of those issues. So I just absolutely echo that. We can't forget why we're here when we think about what we're going to do next. And I think it seems often that we want to gloss over the mistake and just move forward and push to the future. And while that's a good sentiment, we also have to understand what got us there, so that we don't repeat those mistakes other places. And the security and safety of our town should be priority one. That's local police department. So please go back and look at the letter I wrote you guys before, and the other comments. Please reach out to me if you have further questions. I grew up in a small town that ended up losing their police department and contracting with a county substation. So we had a substation in town. Over the years, as policing continued to get harder and harder to fund and harder to find cops, the county itself had to roll back and could no longer provide the substation that it did. And that was about 10, 15 years after the initial transition. And so I just worry about seeing that here, you know, as Ames brought up, it's about our sovereignty as a town. And if we cannot provide within our structure, we can't figure out how to do that within the structure that we have, provide police, what are we doing as a town, I think is my next question. So I will end there. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Melody. Who else online would like to make a public comment?
Anderson. I'm a 33-year resident of Big Springs, and
Would you do me a favor and just speak a little louder? Maybe we can pick you up. We can barely hear you.
oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, that's better.
Great.
Okay, yeah. So I'm a 33-year resident of Big Springs, and to me, this is always
What's your name? I'm sorry.
Judy Anderson.
Thanks, Judy.
And this has always been, I want to say first, I really appreciate this meeting being set up, because I think we need to speak to these issues and get some, move into something positive. So it's always seemed like a safe place to live up until like 4 years ago. And then that was the end of it. I don't know what to do about what the policing is or whatever, but it's been horrible. So, I mean, speaking for myself. So, I really can't speak much. I've been advised not to. But I do want to make those comments, and I do want to hear from other law enforcement people who might have some better ideas on, you know, do we go with the local cops? Do we go to Boulder County? I don't know that. Anyway, sorry. I really need to stop speaking. So thank you for the time.
Thank you for your time. Thanks for speaking, Judy. No one else online to make a comment?
There's Peter.
Go ahead, Peter.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, resident of Big Springs area, and I just I'm for the Boulder County Sheriff's Office taking over. Professionalism, cost savings, efficiency, great service in the past, and I am very concerned about the transiency of what a local department would be, and that's just my opinion.
Thanks, Peter.
Andrew.
Andrew. Can't hear you.
Andrew lowered his hand.
Okay, how about now?
Perfect.
Hi, thanks everyone. Appreciate your service for the meeting and everyone's comments. I resident in Nederland, 787 West 1st Street, and I earlier this summer, as we were in the throes of losing our police force, and I'm also a member of the DDA, just for whatever that's worth. Just full disclosure. I was really disappointed that we we're ever put in a position to lose our local police force, and that we've had a police force for so long. And however, there were a couple of instances, there was one specific situation that had to do with jurisdictions where I live pretty close to a border of the town of Nederland and outside of the town of Nederland, where was put in a position where it was really not town's authority, it was Boulder County Sheriff's authority, and or other law enforcement agencies. And it was pretty frustrating to feel that like I couldn't get resolution or help because of it being on the threshold of, we're right here, but however, because this property line is here, really it's Boulder County Sheriff's deal. You're going to need to call them. And in fact, then it got referred to, Forest Service. That was one thing. And then over the course of the summer and reflecting on it and having multiple interactions with our Boulder County sheriffs over the summer and fall and winter, and seeing the same faces and seeing like the professionalism and efficiency, and not that there wasn't that same service offered by our local force, but just that I was awakened to jurisdictional issues being right on the border, that really I felt like it would have been better to have one, at that point, the sheriffs. And then subsequently, like I felt like the sheriffs have done a very good job. So, I've kind of come full circle. Well, not full circle, but started out really pushing to keep Ned PD, and now, for a couple of different reasons. One for just jurisdictional, kind of being able to have total jurisdiction, and then also seeing that it's not always like random different people. It's a lot of the same sheriffs that come up and that know, and so I'm speaking in favor of Boulder County sheriffs. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Barb.
Hey, Barb.
Hi, Barbara Hart, 245 Apollo Drive, Blackhawk. I just wanted to say real quick, this has been a long road, and we've been going down this road for a long time, and it's time to make decisions and not do another 6 months of back and forth and trying to hire somebody. And I think what we need to do is listen to the sheriff's department and ask them, if we move forward with them, how quickly do things move? How many people will we have that are local? We'll have a sergeant that is our sergeant. This is all stuff that probably, if answered, could put some of the fear of Boulder County taking over away. I would also like to ask, as a side note, because we've always had a great relationship with the Nederland Police Department as the Mountaineer newspaper, I would like to ask that the Boulder County Sheriff turn in the same type of report that the Nederland Police Department did to us and to the town on a monthly basis, so that we understand what is going on in town. It's been months and months of lots of things happening, and we have no idea. We have to request case information one by one, if we even hear about it. And it would be really nice to get back to the point where that is being shared on a monthly basis. How many tickets, how many arrests, how many whatever, so that the community is aware of what's going on, because there's too much going on behind the scenes that we're just not being informed about. So anyways, that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Barb. Any more comments online? If not, seems like it was a pretty good segue. Barb's comment and one a few comments ago. So, I was gonna ask the sheriffs to maybe talk with us a bit about really how things go. It's Lion Superior and and thoughts for Nederland.
So I'll start. Again, I'm Curtis Johnson, I'm the sheriff, and I will have Jim follow up. Jim has some unique experience because during his career, he was actually the town sergeant for Superior before getting promoted, moving out. So he has worked that environment in the past. But I think it's important first to make sure, one, thank you to the Nederland community for being here. Obviously, they care about public safety in their community. And we're not here to give a sales pitch. We're here to answer questions because ultimately, this is a decision that you as trustees in your community needs to make for what's best for you. And I don't have a dog in the fight. We are an option. And really you have two options, to have your own police department or to contract with the sheriff's office. And ultimately that's your call, not mine. If you choose to go with us, then we can talk about what that would look like and how we would support you. And a lot of those decisions, again, are also up to you. Depending on how much staffing you want to have, that's a decision you can make. And obviously there are financial implications to that. And we can certainly recommend what we think would work best for you. But also, it's, I think, important to understand where we've been for the last several months and even the last several years, because we have been working in a bit of a hybrid situation where Nederland has not been able to staff the police department overnight. So we've had a contract in place for many years that covers your nighttime hours when you didn't have officers to work the street. And that has worked. Obviously, if we move forward with a different contract, we'd want to put that all together under one umbrella, just for the sake of not having multiple contracts. But since the police department dissolved and we had our kind of initial conversations back in July, we were pretty clear that it will take time for us to staff up because we do not have extra deputies sitting around waiting to work in other communities. We would have to hire and train more staff. And that will take time, and we will probably have to have, once we have a firm commitment and a signed agreement, then we will work towards accomplishing that staffing. It will not be everything you want at once, but we will build towards getting where whatever staffing level we agreed upon will get to. Since July, we've been staffing you during the daytime with overtime. And I think true comments from the community, there are a number of deputies that enjoy working up here and have signed up for that overtime on their days off, not only because they want extra money in their pocket, but because they also enjoy working in this community. And they've taken the time to get out and walk around town and build connections with people, and you see the same faces. And so I don't think it will be a huge challenge finding people who want to work in Nederland and engage the community. The challenge will be finding enough staffing to backfill them so that we have appropriate staffing throughout the county. As you mentioned, we currently have contracts with Lions and Superior. They're very different in their wants and needs. They're different communities with different expectations. We do have those communities participate in selecting who that town sergeant is. We want their opinion. Ultimately, the decision is mine as their employer, but we like your input to make sure we have someone that will fit with your community and work with you. We do have engagement with the boards of trustees in those communities. So those sergeants do appear on behalf of the sheriff's office as basically your town police chief. Reporting information on a monthly basis is stuff that we do in other communities. We have those sergeants keep track of what's going on in your community and report it back to you in the way that you would prefer it to be. So those are not new or different or difficult things. They're not things we've been doing for the last 7 months because we've been staffing with overtime and just trying to make sure we help keep your community safe as a stopgap until we have a final decision. So ultimately, I want you to know that we're here to support and help if you want us to. And if you choose to rebuild your police department, that's okay too. That's a community decision that you need to make. And I'll let Jim talk about specifically his experience in Superior, what a contract may look like, and how that works.
All right. So again, I'm Jim Chamberlain. I'm the Operations Division Chief. Been on the Sheriff's Office for 27 years, and 9 of my 27 years were spent as a contract sergeant in the town of Superior. So I was down there once, I left, and I went back because they wanted me back. As the contract sergeant, I was their police chief. I interacted with their town board, their town staff. I was just like another member of the town staff. They didn't treat me any differently than anybody else from the town staff. And the majority of the time that I was down there, the officers that I had working for me, we bid for shifts or districts every year. I'd say, I think 3 of the people were there all 9 years because they liked being in that community. They get in that community and they want to stay in that small town community. So even if a person only stays there a year, it's still a year that they're spending time within that community. But most of the time, when someone gets into a community, they want to keep bidding for that same spot because they like it. And they learn there's a lot to do in a smaller town, and you have a lot more impact in a smaller town. So our sergeants normally work 3 to 5 years in their assignment because we want to spread it out and have give people different opportunities. But we have never had a time when a sergeant was getting ready to leave that the town didn't say, no, we want them to stay forever. And then we move somebody else in and they're just as happy, if not happier, with the next person we move in. Because everybody we move in is a professional. We make sure that you're going to be happy with the person you get and that they're the right fit for the town. We're not just going to send someone saying, nah, this is the guy that's not working the best. We're going to put him up there. No, we want to give you something that's a reflection of us and is of good quality. Same with the deputies that we have. Like Curtis said, the towns we contract with now are completely different. Superior contracts, and they have 9 deputies that work in town, so they have a lot more. Lyons has less. They don't want the same community impact. So we can look at different hybrids and go in that direction. As a town sergeant, once a month, I went to the board meeting. I presented them with everything that was going on in the town. On a weekly basis, I provided all the information to the town manager. In Lyons, they want something different. They don't want as many officers, but the town sergeant goes to every board meeting and does some sort of presentation at every board meeting. So as long as it fits within the mission and values of the sheriff's office, we're willing to work with you on your culture and being a part of your community. We're not someone that comes in and just says, okay, this is the way it's going to happen. We want input from the town and the community on how they want their policing to be.
Thank you. Appreciate those. What was that? Why that keeps squeaking? Appreciate your insights. Sorry, we're doing a little IT here. Very much. And yeah, just so with with Superior and Lyons being different kinds of arrangements, but just one general structure is there's a contract sergeant, and then there are deputies that round out the contract amount of coverage.
Deputies then, with both contracts, they have a partial detective position or full-time detective positions. They don't actually work within the town. So if you look at a lot of small town agencies, they have someone who's a detective and they get all detective cases. In our detective bureau, we have 12 detectives and they all specialize in different things. So you pay for half a detective, we could say, but that doesn't mean all those cases would go to that detective. They would be divided on those who specialize in those certain areas. So you're paying for your portion in the bureau, but the cases are being assigned to specialists to work those cases so we can close them out in a better manner.
Can we ask other questions?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So kind of going back to what some of the things that our residents have brought up, I'm going to go back to something Elizabeth had said. Superior recently had a natural disaster, a couple of them with the fire. And one of her concerns was, how do we respond? How will you respond if there's a natural disaster situation?
So with Superior going through the Marshall Fire, because we are their contract town, we were their law enforcement. We worked with their fire protection district. We assumed them as part of the county. That fire involved 3 different jurisdictions, unincorporated plus Louisville plus Superior. It was very seamless working with Superior because we had a relationship as their law enforcement and we supported them 100%. Different challenges in Louisville. It has its own police department, its own fire department, and its own city structure. It was a little more challenging at some points during the fire, but there were some lessons learned that I would caution you about and that we talked with Miranda about a little bit. And some of that is really the emergency management function that any municipality is supposed to have for their community and who provides that emergency management function for your community. And what does that look like? And one of the things we're working on with the community's post-Marshall fire is realizing that Superior did not have a very robust emergency management system. For that incident, because we had a contract with them, we just kind of said, we got your back, we'll take care of it, we'll run with it, and we'll sort it out later. And ultimately where we're getting to is potentially partnering with them to join the Boulder County Office of Disaster Management as a partner organization. Currently, the Office of Disaster Management is funded by the City of Boulder and Boulder County to provide disaster management for the City of Boulder and unincorporated Boulder County, because each other municipality should be supplying that function for their community. But we are going to look at how we can expand that model and make it a broader Office of Disaster Management. Might be an opportunity for you outside of this contract to look at how we do emergency management up here.
Absolutely. And that was something that May brought up as well, is how do we evacuate, or what do we do in that emergency situation?
Yeah, we have spent so much time working on evacuations since December 30th of 21. And you know, the good news for the mountain communities is this area was already built out with evacuation zones, because everything west of 36 is what we considered our high fire danger at the time. A lot of the work we've had to do now was expanding that work into the flats, where we now know there's vulnerability. But it has forced us to relook at all of that, and working with your fire chief, all the mountain fire chiefs, on what that looks like. They're very engaged in that work. And we also know that the likelihood, if there's a disaster in this area, it's probably going to involve more than just Nederland, and we're going to have some ownership in that too. And so how do we work together to make sure that we're doing right by all of our community members up here is a piece of what we'd like to work on in the future.
Did you have anything to add, Jim?
Yeah, I was going to talk about the 2013 floods were also brought up, and we were contracting with Lions and Superior at the time, and we made sure our staff stayed in those towns. You know, we still have other parts of the county to cover, but we made a commitment to those communities that we'd be there for them. Our staff in Lions, as you know, Lions was hit very hard. We had deputies and their town sergeant who actually lived in town in the high school for several days before we could help to them. They stayed in there and continued to work and support that community the entire time. So we're not going to abandon any one area to cover something else. We're going to make sure we can provide coverage to all that we're accountable for.
I had a quick question. The Office of Disaster Management, is that something that was already existing, or is that something you kind of brought together since that?
No, that's been in existence for decades. We have one emergency manager that serves the city and county. Both entities pay into that office. It's housed at the sheriff's office, but the city of Boulder has ownership with it.
That's right. Oh, that's what you said. And now Louisville, and then you said what came out of that is it does.
Working with, we want to communicate with some of the other smaller communities, because ultimately what happens, and Lafayette's a good example, for many years their police chief was the emergency manager and really wasn't fully engaged in all the work that it takes to prepare your community for a disaster. And as soon as they got a new fire chief, they were like, now you're the emergency manager. And that too is additional work on someone who's trying to run a fire department.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're talking with all of these communities about, can we do it better collectively? And it'll take some funding, some staff to make it work. But how that looks, we think we might be able to do a better job throughout the county collectively, as opposed to each community trying to do their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be something we buy into, like, to help you guys with that as a contract add-on?
It could be.
I like that.
We're not quite there yet.
Right.
But that's kind of the road we're going down is if we need to hire someone to do additional preparedness work in the smaller communities that aren't currently getting the service, how we would fund that, you know, we'd have to agree upon a model that works for the size of your community and your expectations. But it's where we're headed in looking at least communicating.
It seems that'd be easier for us versus hiring an emergency manager that would probably end up being part-time.
I just thought maybe we could address the question of response times. And once we were, well, you know, and once, if we were to be fully staffed, you know, in the event that we choose to go with the sheriff's department, at that point, what would that look like? And if there were, if there would be potential reasons or events where deputies would be called away to other parts of the mountain community potentially, because it's a much larger area than the 1.5 square miles that is our tiny town of Nederland, right? Would that potentially affect response times in town?
So some of that is under your control with regards to what staffing level you want to contractually agree to. Yes, it is possible that something really bad could be happening in Allen's Park and we need to send people that way. If you contract in a way that really commits us to having a deputy in town, our obligation will be to have that deputy in town. We've previously had kind of an arrangement, and Jim can speak more to this, but I think the other piece that I heard earlier was unincorporated Boulder County community. So Niwot, for example, versus a contract community that's paying for our service. If you have a deputy in town that you are paying for, your response times are going to be much better than if I have to send somebody from Allen's Park or Lyons or Superior to get up here. And so some of that is what we need to talk through on if you only pay for half a deputy at night, so their obligation is to be in your community 50% of the time. Invariably, a bad thing could happen during the 50% of the time that they're not in your community, and that will create a longer response time. Jim, do you want to talk about how some of that works with response times and our previous agreements with where we tried to keep people?
Okay, nobody hear me? All right.
Yeah, Division Chief, those online said that it was harder to hear you, so.
All right, how about now?
That's better. You pretty much have to put this right next, right, almost eat it. Yeah.
All right, I'll try to speak up a little bit more. Response time. So in our unincorporated Boulder County, our times can be a little bit longer. In our current contract towns, the times are much quicker. Right now, the way the contract worked previously, that the Nederland officers could go 7 to 8 miles outside of the town to assist the county, and then we'd come in and help them. So that's kind of the way it is in most of the communities. Superior, they want their people in town. So the people can go up to a mile outside of the town's jurisdiction. Does that mean that if we have a call in Coal Creek and the Superior car is the closest unit and it's an emergency, we're not going to send them? No. But the way we do that is, okay, we're going to take the Superior car and he's going to Coal Creek. The next closest car to Superior is now going down to cover Superior. So it'd be the same thing with Nederland. If you had people who are guaranteed to be here full time, if we had to send them to Allen's Park for an emergency, we would send someone from Boulder up to Nederland to make sure you still have the coverage you were required.
Great, thank you.
One of the things I want to bring up, and this was actually a letter that was written into us, and that the fear of going with Boulder County Sheriff's Office is that there may be a lack of other support services such as mental health, behavioral mental health. And I do want to articulate, and maybe Miranda, you can also articulate, and then I'd love for Boulder County to respond. We just received a grant in order to support those services, correct?
We got a DOLA grant for peace officer, behavioral health support, and community partnership grants for $167,000. So.
Yeah. And so that's a big deal, I think, in terms of the other services that we have to support, and that won't be of any conflict with the services that you're going to
No,
provide.
because the grant that you got is going to provide a co-responder to our current co-responder program. So they're going to be working with a co-responder program that we already have in place. So again, that's going to provide more services to the town. Because
Okay.
again, if that person's not here, we're going to use the county co-responders to come up and assist in incidents that happen in the town of Nederland.
So I think that's wonderful news to hear for folks. So not only do we have our own co-responder, but we'd have augmented support from
That is
Boulder
correct.
County as a
Yeah,
result
'cause
of our contract.
Your DOLA grant is going to provide you with a co-responder that's going to be attached to our program, which gets all the training with our current co-responder personnel. And we use them all the time. They're an incredible and invaluable resource.
And that current co-responder program includes Superior, Lafayette, Erie, Lyons, and unincorporated Boulder County. The only flats community that doesn't participate is Louisville. And then the city of Boulder and the city of Longmont have their own programs because they're much larger communities with more significant needs that they're running their own programs. But having that countywide program allows us the flexibility to use those resources where they're needed, regardless of the jurisdictional tie.
Does anybody have anything else? I'll keep going.
Great, go for it.
Question. It is difficult to hire and recruit police officers. there is an assumption that because you're Boulder County, there's an ability to scale a little bit easier. You might have it easier to attract talent. Can you talk through that a little bit and how that puts you in a little bit of a maybe advantage or maybe disadvantage compared to a mountain town? But love to hear your thoughts.
So there are advantages. Just based on the size of our organization, we're able to attract people. And people, we hire a lot of people that are encouraged or interested in working in different parts of the county at different times in their career. So for some people, working in Lyons for a couple years is really cool, but then they want to work someplace else. And we have those options to be flexible and allow people to do different things. We also, as a larger organization, have lots of other opportunities. There's career growth opportunities that a small community may not be able to offer because you really have your chief and maybe some officers. There's not like a career progression that people can follow where we offer that to people. It's more desirable work environment. Our retirement plan is, it's a para-state retirement plan through the state trooper plan, which offers a great retirement benefit for deputies at 25 years of service. They can have a good retirement. That's appealing, maybe not to all of the youngsters getting into this work because they don't think that far in advance. But health insurance, all the benefits that come with working for a larger organization that we can provide them and then allow them to work in your community benefits us. Now, that is not to say that we're not still struggling to hire people. Everyone is still challenged by getting people into this career. A lot of it, what we're learning, a recent experience would be trying to hire dispatchers for our dispatch center. We had to raise salaries significantly. As a result of some work that we did last year investing in those employees, we got where we would normally get 10 applications, we got 75. Where we would usually have 3 or 4 pass the testing, we had 25 pass the testing. So to some degree, money talks too. The reality of that for you is if we have to raise salaries to be competitive and hire good people, because we have no interest in lowering standards to fill positions, that's a pass through to you. You will see reflected in your contract.
Sure.
But there are a lot of overhead pieces that we take off the plate for you. Records and records management are built into the contract. We talked a little bit about things like animal control. That can be in the contract so that our animal control officers work for your community. All of the other back-end overhead that you don't see, like support for body-worn cameras, we have a staff for that. All the evidence and things that we have to store, we have a place for that. All of the information we have to provide to the district attorney's office to prosecute cases, we have systems in place to do that. That is all built into that price per deputy. And then the investigative support. Having a team of detectives that should you have something up here that needs significant investigation, you get the benefit of us having experienced and well-trained investigators to work those cases.
Okay. And like was the question from Barb Hart, how long is it taking your recruiting efforts? I mean, how long does that typically take?
So we're hiring in 2 different realms right now. One is trying to attract laterals who are already certified peace officers that can come in and hit the ground running quicker. The second piece is hiring people who have not been to an academy and sending them to an academy that starts in July of this year. We know realistically, based on where we're at right now and what we're seeing, it'll take us easily 8 to 12 months to get you close to fully staffing. Are there things we can work on in between? A hybrid of using overtime funded by this community to help bolster staffing, getting key people in place. We'd like to get, obviously, the sergeant here sooner than later. And that might be something we could accomplish summertime, is getting the sergeant in place to start knowing and learning the community and being present. And those sergeant positions are not strictly administrative. We consider them primarily working sergeants. So they also go out and respond to calls in the community and get to know people in the community. Then adding deputy staffing, it'll depend on how we do over the next couple of months. Hopeful that within a year we could be at whatever level of staffing you'd like to be.
This might be a tough question, but any of these present deputies that have been signing up for, duty up here and partially because of the money, partially because they like it, are any of them approaching contract sergeant status, or is that something that's hard to say?
So Currently, we do not have a promotion list, so we will run a promotion process in the spring. There is one sergeant who likes to work up here, isn't there?
There,
Couple.
well, actually now there's 3 sergeants that actually work some of the extra duty up here and they like being up here in town. So I think we will have some options for people who put in for the position.
We're not going to give you a brand new sergeant. We're going to give you someone with some experience and the ability to work with your community.
Thanks.
So I do have a question also about if the town, I don't mean a personal grievance, like an individual community member might have a bad experience with a deputy or with the sergeant or whatever it might be. I assume that will follow regular processes that you guys already have in place. But if the town, like the Board of Trustees, were to have an issue with a particular member of staff or with how things are being done, how would that be addressed and what recourse would we have as a town?
So, like we said, there's a town sergeant. If you're not happy with the town sergeant or something that's going on, that sergeant has a boss. We have a commander who oversees the contract sergeants. So then you'd go to them. If you're not happy with that answer, you'd come to me. If you're not happy with that answer, you'd go to him. So we're here to look at any complaints that you have because we want to work with the community, not against it.
And to your first point, if there's a complaint against a deputy's work or, let's just say a use of force complaint from a community member, we have a process in place for investigating those complaints. We would follow that process. Ultimately, as our employee, they will follow our disciplinary policies and our investigative policies, and we'll address that.
And then we also understand, but just for everyone else, just for the community, that if we were to try this out and decide that we actually don't like it and we'd like to rebuild our police department, however unlikely it would be that we would be able to pull such a thing off, how much time would we need to give you in order to start that up?
So the way all of our contracts are written is it's a 12-month period because, depending on staffing, if we're going to have to lay people off, we don't want to. If we can find a way to do it through attrition, we'd rather do that. So all of our contracts are written that, if you decide you want to not go forward with a contract, it's a 12-month notice.
Thank you.
So 12-month notice is what we'd have to provide. Okay.
All my other questions are about money, but I figure we're getting to that.
I have one question from Atashna, who's a kind of senior in the community. I can't clarify it because it's her questions, but I think she kind of would hold you to clarify it yourselves. How do you define community policing?
So for us, community policing means being present and establishing relationships in the community. And when we are contracting with the community, making sure that we are working within the culture and values of the community. We know that the way that we police Lyons is very different than how we police Superior. And so meeting your community's expectations, being present, being available, building relationships, and working with the community to solve your community public safety problems in the way you best see fit.
Thanks. She has a follow-up. So can you give an example or two of actual experiences with community policing in assessing and handling tense or stressful detainees? I know, and I would, my take, it's a little more on the mental health side.
Yeah, so clearly mental health is one of our biggest challenges in all the work that we do, whether it's out on patrol, engaging people in the community. And so we work really hard with our employees on de-escalation and communication skills, on teaching patience and tactics as opposed to resorting immediately to hands-on or physical force. We want to be cognizant that we do what's right for your community. And I know up here the expectations may be very different than they are in Longmont. And so our skill set is really, you have to understand too, that we have lots of employees who work alone. We can have somebody alone in Allen's Park dealing with an intoxicated person who's having a mental health crisis, and they don't have help coming for 30 minutes. And so they become very skilled at how they communicate with people, when it's appropriate to back off and not engage with people until there's other resources available. And that's where we're headed with how we want to engage communities and make sure that we are not quick to force, but that we can resolve situations without violence.
Thanks.
Mayor Billy, I believe Kathleen has had her hand up. Are we
Oh.
allowed to take questions?
Yeah, yes. Actually, do you mind just so the people online can hear your question?
I'm just wondering, since the people voted to collect the additional tax, if we go with the county, is the tax money go towards paying for that? Because I don't think you can use it on anything else except law enforcement. Or do you just not collect it? Because we're not, I mean, was it specific that it was for our police department? It wasn't?
The wording was definitely, in that we weren't sure where we would go or where we'd end up having to go. The word is law enforcement. The term we use is law enforcement.
Or any other municipal services.
Or any other.
Any
yeah,
other.
but I think that the thing that pertains to law enforcement, we kept generic, quite honestly, as law enforcement.
Yeah.
And we also
And
included
any
other
other
language.
municipal service.
So no matter what, the tax will be collected.
Well, there are ways that it could not be collected, but as it stands now, yes, it will be collected.
Okay.
The people could do a repeal.
A
on the next-
referendum.
Yeah.
I think it's too late for a referendum.
Well, I mean, for the future, and then
Yeah.
But I think the amount of money collected is barely going to offset the extra costs, because even this would be extra cost than what we budgeted 2 years ago. And this money, if people want good law enforcement and want the coverage that people want in town, most of the time, like I'm hearing, quick response times, et cetera, that's extra. It's going to cost more. And I don't think without that money, we'd be able to afford the coverage people want. So
we can use the tax money to hire them.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, yes, definitely. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's what I meant. We kept it vague so it could go towards either a rebuild or sheriff office contracting, because the sheriff office contracting is not, costs money too. Go ahead, Linda. If you could come up and talk into the drill.
My name's Linda Glasser. I live at 490 North Bridge Street. I've lived here a really long time. I won't tell you how many years, because that's how old I am. I've seen a lot of ups and downs with the town, with the police. We had one police officer, Jimmy Griffith, that knew everybody in town, and he lived in town. A lot of the officers, and that includes Larry, knew the community. I knew his family, but he didn't live in town. And I think that made a huge difference. I'm glad to see that we're moving in the direction of Boulder County. I was hearing a lot of comments about response time. My husband just had a medical emergency about a year ago, and I was still on the phone with dispatch, and Boulder County was at my door. So I was really pleased with that. So the response time is excellent. And I thank you for your professionalism.
Mayor Billy Ames has his hand raised, as well as Peter online.
Thanks, Miranda. Ames, go ahead. You have questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Terrific. So much of what we're talking about now is comparing the contract situation that we have today with the potential of the upcoming contract. So I'd like to address sort of how they are similar, how we could see the same thing modeling, but also point out that that the fact that we have that appears to be fairly dissimilar, right? When that, for example, we have deputies that want to come and work for us, and certainly they like working up here, but extra cash, overtime cash is a major league motivator, right? So to sort of put that into perspective, hiring our own police department is going to be where those same people that like to work for us will be working directly for us. So it would be helpful to understand, you know, where are the similarities? Because I think a lot of people are thinking what we have today is a perfect example of what we'll have tomorrow. And I think there might be similarity, but certainly they're not the same thing. So could you sort of go through that?
I'm assuming, Ames, that's a question for the sheriff's office, or
Yes.
what
Yes,
it would
it
be
is.
is like comparing this, extra duty coverage, and I guess what you can talk about are the numbers of police versus a assigned sergeant and deputies.
Right. And even you can weave in there, you know, for example, we talked about how we had a half a sheriff overnight, right? Well, that's not law enforcement in a town, right? We need someone overnight, and we need to budget for it. We need to pay for it. We need to recruit for it. We need to have it, right? So we're not going to do that, right? This isn't a place where we shave the budget, where we save money. We shouldn't be looking to save money in law enforcement. We should be looking to get exactly what we need. And if it happens to come more effectively, not efficiently, effectively from the Boulder County Sheriff's Department, then that's why we make that decision, right? So comparing what we know, what we've been through recently, and the added support we have when our own PD was circling the drain due to lack of funding and turnover that due to poor management. These are history. That's not the way our new PD is going to run. I believe in our BOT right now. I believe you guys are going to create an outstanding police department. So I'm not looking now to improve on what was there historically. And so I would just like the sheriff's guys, I'm sorry, the intros were a little hard here, so not exactly sure who's who, to just sort of talk through that, you know, what we've had historically, what we've had now versus what you would offer going forward. And then we need to compare that not to what they were, but to what we're going to do going forward. An exceptional Nederland Police Department. So I'm sorry to net it out. Can you
It sounds
compare
like a
what you're going
statement
to
more than a
do
question,
with
because I
what
don't know
we
who
have
gets to
now?
answer that second part.
Yep.
So if you have a direct question for the sheriff, can you just make it real short and to the point, because I don't know.
Can you
who's supposed
please
to answer
address
what.
how what you propose or what we could build together is similar and different from what we have right now?
So I'm still a little confused by it, but I think the big takeaway from that is the fact that we will provide stability for your community in the long run. Because we will have, once we build the staffing to support your community, we'll be able to maintain it and maintain a presence in your community and not have the ups and downs that you've experienced over the years. The bigger difference will be also that stability in staff, because right now the overtime that we're providing is simply first come, first serve, sign up. So that the variability of the personnel is wide throughout the organization. Whereas if we are meeting your contractual expectations, there'll be a lot more consistency in who you see up here.
Okay, so just to be clear, going forward, you would offer something similar to what we would build internally, and it would come from you.
Yeah, they would be assigned office, a sergeant, a contract sergeant, and contract deputies who would, do their hours in and around Nederland.
As well as overnight coverage, depending on the contract that we strike with you. Yeah.
Peter had his hand raised.
Oh yeah, you did mention Peter, and then Elizabeth, you could be next. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And I came into this meeting not really, sure of what Boulder County Sheriff's Office would provide. I think you guys have made it very clear that you have an experienced, efficient, professional organization that can step right in and get this ball rolling. I don't understand why, as a town, we would want to try to reinvent the wheel when the wheel's already invented. As for what Ames has been saying, we don't know who would be an exceptional, outstanding department. It's a totally unknown, whereas you're dealing with an organization that has history and it has the response times that people have been offering as examples have shown it to be quite efficient and effective. So it seems like the conversation should be pretty much resolved by now. And let's get, instead of like keep dragging our feet, let's get this ball rolling and let's put the law enforcement into place and start our partnership with BCSO.
Good job on the acronym. Elizabeth.
So I had one question really for the Sheriff's Department, sort of a clarification. In the event of, and we've had several, so in the event of a major disaster, not focused on one community, like it's a wildfire in Nederland or that area. We know that you come, you do a wonderful job. Can't say enough for what you've done for us. But the 2013 floods is a good example, where the entire Front Range was a disaster area. If we contract with Boulder County Sheriff's Office and we have a dedicated sergeant and we have some dedicated deputies literally assigned to Nederland, in that kind of emergency, we could feel confident that the people who were actually dedicated to Nederland would be here to support the town, to coordinate evacuation. I know that during that flood and afterwards, there were meetings right in this building with our Nederland police chief and fire chief and so on, informing the community about support and about when food would be delivered and all of those sorts of things. If we had that kind of contract with you, would that in fact be the case, that sergeant and deputies would be here even if lots of other areas in the county are also in disaster mode?
You know, we've had numerous situations or disasters within the county, different areas, but we've never left the contract towns without their personnel so we could handle the other emergencies. We've always made sure we've maintained that consistency within those towns to make sure that they knew they weren't forgotten. They were still part of the community, even though they weren't in the initially affected area.
Okay.
And just for reference on that scaling side, obviously your sergeant and your deputies know your community, but in Superior during the Marshall Fire, not only did we have the town sergeant and the deputies that worked that community in the community, but because it was so overwhelming, we were able to mobilize 100 deputies that day to get immediately into the field to serve both unincorporated Boulder County, the town of Superior, and support Louisville as well.
Okay, thank you.
How many deputies do you have? I mean, what is your staff?
So
numbers?
The total organization is about 440 people. As far as deputies, we're at 240-ish. A lot of those are employed in the jail setting, but that doesn't always mean they have to be working in the jail. They can give up people to help us as well.
Melody has her hand raised, and then Jim.
Okay, Melody? Thanks. We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes?
Okay. I don't know if this is a question for Miranda or for the sheriff, but we currently rent the space that our police department operates out of. Would that be something that you guys would continue? And is that included in this kind of figure that we've gotten before as far as cost of contract?
So all of our contracts are written, it's up to the town to provide our deputies with a space to work out of. So the town would continue to rent that same space.
And we do have a lease agreement on that space, I believe, till 2026 or 2027.
What were we thinking? Okay.
It's the new party space.
I think Jim was next, and then Scott, and then Jim. Jim.
Jim Marie, 66 Barker Road. I just wanted to add a quick comment. I didn't mean to sound flippant earlier when I said half the cost. What I meant was to gain a department with the level of expertise and professionalism that we would like in our community. by going with Boulder County Sheriff's Office, it will cost us half or maybe even less in the long run because they have the systems in place that they spoke of. They have evidence control. They have the ability to manage the body cam systems. They have internal investigations. They have an HR department. Those kind of things are important. And the thing that I forgot to mention earlier that I think is very important for our small community is law enforcement is changing. Over the next 5 to 10 years, the cost of law enforcement, recruitment, and having good people in place, the eyes that are on that is just going to continue to increase. What's going to happen when our public work department's employees and other town staff are making half what a police department member in our community makes? You know, I think that will kill morale by having a separated contract that then is not part of our wage parity within the town staff. It will make a big difference. I mean, I personally, I think our town manager shouldn't be making, you know, the most of any actual paid staff within town. That's just how I think it should be. You know, unfortunately, current systems and policing environment does not allow that to be the case. And so I think you solve a lot of problems with this. And I think a lot of the community would feel much better if they heard the details that were talked about here tonight, that we would have assigned personnel right here in Nederland that we would get to know on an ongoing basis. Also, if it's going to take Boulder County 8 to 12 months to staff up for us, how long is it going to take our department to hire, train, and certify a competent professional department in our small town and maintain it? Thank you.
Scott Papich, one more time. So there's a few comments made in the last few minutes by online. We had Peter and Ames and Jim. You just made some comments as well. When the word stability, Sheriff, you brought up the word stability a few minutes ago. I really want everybody in the community to be clear about what you mean by stability, because what I'm interpreting is some people think stability means we have a deputy for a full shift, not a half a shift. And that's an important thing to understand. But a bigger picture of stability is the reason we're still doing this is because we haven't found stability in a police department. 1 or 2 officers move on and we're starting over, right? Stability, I'm presuming that means if 1 or 2 deputies decide they don't want to be part of the program here in Nederland at some point, we're not running short from that on. We're back to a full staff right away. Is that correct?
As quickly as we can, depending on how our staffing is as an organization. But yeah, that the stability that we want to provide is a consistent presence in your community, consistent leadership, that for 3 to 5 years, you'll have the same sergeant working up here, being your police chief, but also understand those sergeant positions are a career enhancer for our employees. It gives them the opportunity to work with the community and be a small town police chief. Jim's a division chief today in part because of the experience he had being Superior's chief. So we do like to make those opportunities available to other employees. You're not going to get the same sergeant forever. And like Jim said, every time we have turnover in Lions or Superior, they're upset that we're rotating somebody new in because whoever they had was the best they've ever had. And really quickly, they get a new employee and all of a sudden, no, they're the best we've ever had.
Right.
They get over it. We all build relationships and we don't like to see them change. But for providing public safety services in your community, our organization is big enough to support the ability to make sure that you have staff in your community. It's up to you to decide whether you want 0.5 deputies during the day or 1 full-time deputy during the day. And how that looks is really up to the board and the community to decide, because we can be flexible on that. But understand, I would caution you not to try to look at the numbers and think a half a deputy during the day is enough if your community expectations are higher than that and you want response times to be quick.
Right. But the organization is big enough to provide stability.
Absolutely.
And that's key. That is why we're still working on this.
I can't go away.
That's what
I'm
we're trying to solve, right?
statutorily required to do this work. So
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Scott. Jim.
Jim Girton back again. So, I've been impressed with the Boulder Sheriff's Department since I've lived here. And you seem to have a good proposal, a good way to support the community. Just curious, knowing what you do about Nederland and about other similar communities, what would your recommendation be for staffing up here? Just to get a rough idea, because I think obviously our board has to be very involved with that, but I think I'd like to know what you think would be appropriate.
My recommendation would be a sergeant and 4 deputies. Those 4 deputies would be, we have our shifts split, so our officers work 3 days one week and 4 days the next. So you either work 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. or 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. So it'd be 1 full-time deputy on each side of day shift, 1 half-time deputy on each side of night shift, because call load's lighter at nighttime, and the other mountain deputy has more of an availability to come in and help out. And then 1 extra deputy that you don't necessarily see in town, but it's for backfill. Because as we all know, between vacations, training, court, everything else, you can't have a deputy there all the time. So it'd be 4 deputies and then a half a detective position. So basically 4.5 deputies, a sergeant, and then a portion of an animal control officer to help with the animal control calls.
Let me make sure we got that. 1 sergeant, 4.5 deputies, 1 animal control.
A portion of an animal.
Half
We'd
of-
kind of look at that and figure out what that would be.
Okay, portion of animal control, portion of a detective, and a partridge in a pear tree.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Is there an estimate on the cost of that for today's budget?
Do we go there right now?
I don't know.
I'm just asking Jennifer or.
I mean, it seemed to come naturally
Well,
in the
it did.
conversation.
I'm just
so.
making sure we.
So I think that the number is around 875, 877, I believe.
Could we just get the number out there, Miranda, of what we budgeted for PD this year?
Just shy of 1.2 million.
For our internal PD, right? And then the cost you said, Jennifer?
So the rough estimate is 877,000, give or take a little, because we haven't factored everything in there yet.
Right.
So that's kind of a baseline to begin from for the 4.5 deputies, a partial animal control officer, and a sergeant.
I do want to remind the board, though, that of course that there are additional expenses that town would have to plan for, which is the space and some of those other components. So that, of course, is just going to increase depending on how many things in our current line item we need to keep in order to provide the space and what they.
Do we have a sense of what that is besides the space?
I was going to try to pull that up.
Because the space is 15,000 a year, I think.
So there's the space, dispatch fees are separate. That's a separate contract that we've always
Right.
had with the town.
And that's something we already have in our budget.
And then additional equipment, usually the startup costs, we'd have to buy everybody the tablets that we use for our MDCs, iPhones. So there's some equipment startup costs that would be in there built in to begin with, but most of the time those are one-time fees and then it's built into the background. Most of our costs are actually built into the background per deputy.
Yeah.
So we look at all these different things, records, vehicle replacement, all that stuff is built in. So when you look at your deputy costs, that's figured on a per year basis, and that includes replacing your vehicles, which is something now you have to come to the board and say, okay, we need a new car. Where are we going to come up with that funding? We have it built into that price. So every 5 years, you're getting a new car for the amount of deputies that you have. So there's most of those costs are built in, and your town attorney and Miranda both have that information from us.
Great, thank you.
It's a $400,000 savings to the town by going to
Three.
BCSO.
300.
300,000. And what also happens to the vehicles that are already existing?
We'd be able to sell them.
Yeah, so currently we are in communication with Boulder County. We do have 1 leased vehicle, which we're seeing if there's any sort of arrangement that could be made with their fleet to take that over. And then they have also offered to help us put the other vehicles through auction, which we are going to happily accept that offer because we have a lot of vehicles that aren't operable anyways.
Yeah, I'd like to clean up the graveyard.
Seems like a
Does the
no-brainer to me.
1.2 million include our startup costs this year? That's not our ongoing annual cost for PD. That includes recovering from the devastation, right?
No, it does not.
No, it was really just an ongoing, it would be an ongoing
In
budget.
fact, it would probably grow in subsequent years.
As the cost for just salaries and everything also increases.
Right, and I'm sorry, one point of correction, it was actually 1.1 million because we did reduce the number of officers. Oh, that's right. Which brings us down to one, but still over $1 million it's budgeted for the police department.
For an equivalent coverage, you said for only 3 officers?
So under the 1.1, it was 1 marshal, 1 sergeant, 3 officers, and a police and court clerk.
And a police and court clerk.
And does that also include to have the night coverage from the
Yes,
sheriff's?
that would also include the contract with the Boulder County Sheriff's Office for night coverage, as well as dispatch.
So it's a difference of a little over 200,000.
Are we keeping our court system?
Yeah, I hazard that we're swagging a lot of numbers here, and as Peter did, making some assumptions that I don't think can be made from the swag. So, an actual analysis of what the cost comparison is something that the Board of Trustees will do.
Yep. I think that's reasonable. I mean, I agree.
Yeah,
You're right. We are
most of
doing
it's
some
already been
rounding
done.
right now, and
this number is
that's
all
why I kind of didn't want to go here right now.
coming off of Division Chief Chamberlain's recommendation, which is of course a recommendation, right? I mean, we can drill down into that and look at exactly what we think we need for the town to start with at least, and move from there.
Though I appreciate Jim's question about what they recommend. Kathleen?
Kathleen Chip, I just want to point out that when we talk about a local officer, we're not hiring anybody that's local. We were just hiring someone from across the country. So, and when we did hire unvetted Marshal Paul Carroll, he came from Leavenworth, and that didn't work well for anybody in the community. So like saying we have our own police force, to me, if you want local people and we can't hire someone local, and I mean within 30 miles, they're not local. And if we want to rebuild, I just feel like bringing people here from outside of the state is not local. And I'm feeling better and better about the Boulder Sheriff's Department. So that's where I'm at.
Thanks, Kathleen.
And I will tell you, even we struggle to hire local.
Yeah.
About 80% of our employees don't live in Boulder County because they can't afford to. That's just the reality of Boulder County.
Yeah. True. Too true. Thanks, May.
It's time to go, but I actually, since you guys are here, I had a question for you. There's a dog that barks. They put him out.
No, man.
They put him out Saturday morning about 5:30, and I think they go back to bed. He barks for about 3 hours Saturday and Sunday. And I can't believe that any of his close neighbors haven't called him in. But is this something that would be handled by animal control or dispatch?
If you guys choose to hire animal control as part of the contract, to be handled by animal control.
Thanks.
You would call dispatch. They would dispatch one of our animal control employees up here to deal with it. No, they're on 6 to
Yeah,
6.
they start at 6, so.
Some specific use cases.
Any more questions for the sheriff's office? If not, I have one question for Miranda, so just what do you the rebuild, you and I talked about this, but I told you I'd ask you. The rebuild was you and Chief David Hayes, and we both have some attachment to it. And what do you how you doing? What do you think? Or how have you been doing?
So, a lot of work went into recruitment, obviously, and I just maybe kind of want to cite a couple stats. We received over 70 applications for Marshal Sergeant Officer. We pre-screened 42. We interviewed 19. And at the end of the day, that left us with 2. We had Gled Hill, and then we had an officer who did pass through backgrounds. And so that's a lot of work. That was about 90 days worth of work and a ton of people that we interviewed and spoke with. We can obviously do it again. We can always do it again. I just can't promise any different results. You know, I think recruitment, and the sheriffs know, it's really challenging, and we are, of course, up against them and other municipalities. And so, you know, while we are passionate about putting that effort forward, and that was a desire of this community, I do have concerns that you're going to invest another 90 days and we still may have the same outcome where we just have no one to put before you for a marshal.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks for that.
I mean,
insight.
I do want to point out that I don't think that that was a mistake, right? I don't think it was a mistake to try to rebuild the PD to this far. I wouldn't even necessarily think it's a mistake to try one more round, because I personally, on an ideological basis, which is not how I'm going to try to make decisions based on this, but believe in community autonomy, right? And that's extremely important to me just on a political basis. But there is reality, which always intervenes, right? Whether or not I believe that, we have failed as a board to hire a marshal. And that could be our failing. That could be that maybe another board would have been able to pull it off. We were not. I think that there were a lot of obstacles that are legitimate excuses for why we failed to do so. But we did. And that's why why we are where we are. And it's another 90 days if we want to try to rebuild, to try not to fail again. I'm not feeling particularly confident that the outcome will be any different. And that puts us 90 days back even further from having an adequate safety presence in our community. So there is what we all hope and wish and believe, and we might have, you know, our kind of political thinking behind, and then there's the world that we actually live in, which unfortunately doesn't always align with that.
Thanks, Eric. Any more questions or comments? Chris? Oh, cool. Time. Or should we move to adjourn, Chris? No, and we will informally do that. I want to thank everyone for their time in person, online, and you, Sheriff Johnson and Division Chief Chamberlain. Appreciate y'all's time coming up here today and just being honest and open with us. And it's kind of helpful just to look in your eyes and hear you answer, you know, have you answer our questions. So thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.